When I tell people they can consistently achieve 40 to 50% yearly returns through property, they think I'm crazy, especially when you compare it to the most common asset types or the best investors in the world. Come with me. Okay, so imagine you buy a $400,000 property in a high growth area. And in just 1 year, that property goes up by $60,000. Which, relative to the price of the house, that is a very good 15% growth. However, if you're able to use leverage and put only $100,000 of your own money down and borrow the rest, okay, then that $60,000 of growth that you just got is actually 60% of the actual money that you actually had to put down. That's the power of leverage. So the property grew by 15% of its price, but 60% of the actual capital that you had to put down. Now, yes, there are holding costs, and with today's interest rates, it is most likely that your property is going to be cash flow negative, at least for now, and cost you a little bit of money out of your pocket every year. So let's calculate that real quick. So let's say the property is 5% gross yield. That is that it collects 5% of the price in rent, okay? Now let's say you bought the property with a 90% loan at interest only with a 6.5% interest rate. Since it's a 90% loan and it's not 100% debt, that 6.5% interest rate is going to set back your yield by around 6%, okay? So interest. Then you have holding cost, which usually is going to be about 2% of the price, more or less, okay? That's another 2% holding cost. Therefore, the actual net yield will be 5 minus 6 minus 2. That is negative 3%, more or less. Okay, so we're gonna add that into the equation. And we got negative 3% here. That is more or less about $12,000 a year in holding costs. Now that is likely to be your worst year because as rents go up and potentially interest rates go down, that cash flow is going to improve. Now, of course, that loss is also leveraged. So 3 times 4, the same as 15 times 60, is negative 12%, right? Now, yes, you do have this cost on the one hand, but you have this much greater positive return on the other hand. So experienced investors know how to weigh the upside versus the downside and aim for a collective higher ROI. If I tell you that I give you $50 if you give me 10, wouldn't you accept? Of course. So then what you have here is that your actual net return on invested capital is going to be 60 minus 12, which is a whopping 48%. Now you tell me if you know any other asset type where you can achieve even half of these returns with the relatively low level of risk that well-selected property gives you. Now you do this a few times over a few years and you can be set for life. Now you're probably thinking, but Andy, you surely can't sustain a 15% growth every year. And you might be right, but the thing is you don't need to sustain the same growth percentage to sustain the same ROI over the years. For example, in order to sustain a 60% growth on your invested capital, you don't need a 15% growth on the property. All you need is a $60,000, in this case, absolute dollar amount of growth. And that is going to be a lower and lower percentage of the property value as the years go by. So in the future, when the property is, let's say, $600,000, to achieve that same $60,000 growth, that is a lower 10% growth on that price. If we break it down a little bit more, a $60,000 growth at year 1 will be that 15% that we talked about, yes. But at year 2, to achieve that $60,000 growth, you need a lower 13%. On year 3, you need 11.5. And on year 4, just a bit over 10%. Also, over the first few years, as rents go up and potentially rates also start coming down, that cash flow side of the equation is going to improve, therefore helping maintain that ROI and potentially compensating for any small drops in the growth side of the equation. Now you might say, yeah, but still these growth numbers are still really high, they're higher than average. How can we expect to get this sort of growth? The secret is that if you pick the right markets before they boom, not only you can achieve these results, but even better. For example, from all the growth-oriented properties that I have personally bought for my clients, the first 2 years had an average yearly growth of 22% every year. And it doesn't mean that these results are guaranteed or they are easy to get, but it's just a demonstration that it's possible. And if you get this kind of growth so quickly, in order to maintain that same 4-year performance, you would only need the next 2 years to be averaging around 3.5% growth each. And you would still maintain that return on capital invested for the first 4 years. And that's all you need actually, because the first few years is the most important because you can leverage all that and benefit of the compound effect. The sooner you can get the more growth, the better, because then you can reinvest all of those returns way quicker and therefore increase all that compound effect. Now, I'm not saying anyone out there can easily achieve these returns, but it just shows you what's possible when you combine high growth with leverage with a yield that doesn't kill your cash flow.